Hello, I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for joining me for this breaking news edition as we're seeing live images coming in as a blaze is continuing to rip through the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, with the spire and the roof of the landmark place of worship already collapsing. Now, authorities in Paris have just announced that they're uncertain if any of the cathedral can be saved. This landmark Gothic cathedral draws millions of tourists annually and is arguably the most visited monument in Europe. It's not yet known what caused the blaze, with authorities at the scene doing all they can to save what is left of the cathedral. Devastated people from around the world are taking to Twitter to express their heartbreak as the world watches on, with the fire still raging out of control, destroying one of the most famous symbols of civilization. And for more, let's now bring in our correspondent in France, Christian Millard. Christian, we've just heard then what authorities are saying, that they say that they might not be able to save any more of the cathedral. And we know that French President Emmanuel Macron is now at the scene holding emergency talks. What are we hearing from the president?
It's clear that the latest news are not very optimistic. We are not sure to be able to stop the fire, which broke out about 3.5 hours, and definitely the cause of the fire, as you alluded to, is still not unknown. The Paris prosecutor's office has opened an investigation. It's clear we have different possibilities, but right now what we see, it's images of disaster, of catastrophe, of despair. People feel very struck, despondent when they see all these pictures of Notre Dame on fire, which is one of the key monuments of France, one of the jewels of the world, where we have 14 million visitors per year, which is twice the number we have concerning the Eiffel Tower. And we have on the spot 400 firefighters, which are battling the massive blaze, but as I told you, they are not sure to be able to stop the fire, which means that there is still a possibility, unfortunately, that Notre Dame might be destroyed. The famous spire of 43 meters high collapsed. The upper roof is burning. Most of the parts of the cathedral are collapsing. This is why people cannot be optimistic right now. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, as you said, is on the spot. He came with his wife and a lot of ministers of his own government to try to attend the catastrophe in front of him. And he was saying it's part, Macron said, I quote, "It's part of us which is burning. It's the sorrow of an entire nation." It's true that when the fire broke out, we had French people, but we have so many people coming from all over the world. 2,000 of them had to be evacuated so that the area could be cleared by the police and the firefighters. So this is what we are up to right now. And the night is going to be very long. But concerning the possibilities, of course, it might be accidental because the cathedral was under renovation. It started 2 days ago, and it might be accidental, of course. But still, with being very cautious, I want to remain cautious. There is still a possibility it might be a terrorist attack, because a few months ago, it's very important to remind the people that a group of 4 to 6 people, women and men, with a minibus with explosives inside, tried to perpetrate a terrorist attack against Notre Dame. So it's a possibility. It's not a certainty. It's a possibility. And I want to remind our TV viewers and the French people that ISIS said, after having lost all its territories in Syria and Iraq, they would attack Western targets in France, in Germany, in England. So we have to keep that in mind. It's not the reality, but it's a possibility. And people have to think that it's not fake news to say it's a possibility.
Okay, Christian Millard there in Paris, thank you. We will come back to you a little later on in the bulletin. But for now, let's bring in our senior international affairs correspondent, Owen Alterman, and our senior producer, Jeff Abramowitz. And Jeff, you're a real history buff. Tell us a little bit about the history of this cathedral.
Well, we're talking about a cathedral that is over 800 years old. It was built in 1163. Rather, that's when they started building it, building cathedrals. And it was, here's the funny thing, it was sacked in the French Revolution by the mob, secular mob, but Napoleon had himself crowned emperor there, or crowned himself emperor, and then it fell into disuse. It wasn't used. It was going to be destroyed. But the novel, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, caused great interest in the building, and so they decided to renovate it. So, but for a novel, it would have been destroyed. Christian spoke about the spire which fell. Just to put it in context, we're talking about a spire that weighed 750 tons. So that's one heck of a fire.
Certainly is.
750 tons. And
when that fell, it probably would have crushed everything underneath.
It would have crushed everything underneath and would have gone through the roof like, well, I don't want to use the analogy on air. But the whole thing, the Notre Dame, it's a symbol of France in a way that the Eiffel Tower can never be, because it's religion. It's French nationalism. It's the spirit of France. For example, in 1944, after Paris was liberated from the Germans, Charles de Gaulle, returning to Paris, he held the Mass, of the Thanksgiving Mass, in Notre Dame Cathedral. It was the symbol. It was the unifying place. And to think it's going up, it's going to be destroyed, I mean, it's totally heartbreaking. It
certainly is. And Owen, we are seeing reactions pouring in all across social media, but tell us, what are we hearing internationally to this?
Well, first of all, Sarah, just to go back to something Jeff said, it seems to me that if Paris is a symbol of France coming of age, Notre Dame is the symbol of France being born in some sense, and that is why it's so resonant, as Jeff said. As for the international reaction, Sarah, it's summed up in the way that Israeli Foreign Ministry spokesperson Emmanuel Nachshon, as he put it on Twitter, it just breaks the heart to see an icon of French and world civilization be going up in flames. Certainly echoes the feeling from across Europe, from around the world. Maybe the one world reaction that does stand out, as it often does, is the reaction of U.S. President Donald Trump, who expressed sorrow at what was happening, but also wanted to give some advice to the firefighters, to ask them to put some water on, to drop it from helicopters and planes. Got a swift rebuke from the French firefighters, saying that that would just make things worse. An unusual type of reaction, but again, Donald Trump tends to do things in unusual ways.
And Jeff, with this type of structure, a lot of timber in there, how hard would it be to contain such a blaze?
Pretty difficult. The timber inside would go up like that.
Especially being so old and dry.
Being so old and dry. The timber, not just the walls, the pews, the monuments which haven't been taken out, they would catch fire. Once a fire like this takes hold, it's not just, a couple of fire extinguishers. It's going to be devilishly difficult to put it out.
Certainly, and it would just rip through that building. Okay, and we are about to go out for a short break, but just to bring you up to date, French President Emmanuel Macron has just declared a national emergency as a huge blaze rips through the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, with the spire and the roof of the landmark place of worship already collapsing. Now, we are hearing that authorities do not know if they can control this blaze or if any will be still standing by the morning. But we are hearing that all emergency services are at the scene, doing their absolute best to control this blaze. And we're seeing live images coming in now with flames still pouring out of the roof of the Notre Dame Cathedral there. People have been told to leave the area as authorities work to contain this blaze. And we are taking a quick break. Stay with us, plenty more when we come back.
I'm Nurit Ben.
And I'm Kalev Ben David.
Join us right here on The Rundown for the global headlines defining the day.
Plus in-depth interviews and debates that take you inside the Middle East.
To the stories born out of this region and the massive impact they have all the way to Washington.
The Rundown on I-24 News.
Where the Middle East meets the world.
We heard you loud and clear. You want more clear cut? You got it. Clear Cut Plus gives us an extra half an hour to give you more of the news that matters. We cut through the noise, we cut to the chase, and we cut out the BS. Join me, Michelle McCory, on Clear Cut and Clear Cut Plus for the clearer picture.
There's more to the news than meets the eye. Many voices, many faces, with interests often at odds. We take you deeper beyond the headlines, inside the drama, the controversy, perspectives. There's more than just one view.
I'm Jordana Miller at I-24 News. Join me for the Holy Land Uncovered, a look at this remarkable land filled with so much faith and history and archaeology.
Watch Holy Land Uncovered. Only on I-24 News.
Thanks for staying with us as we go back to this developing story. We're seeing live images coming in right now as a massive blaze is continuing to rip through the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, with the spire and the roof of the landmark place of worship already collapsing. Now, authorities in Paris have just announced that they don't know if any of the cathedral can be saved at this stage. Now, this landmark Gothic cathedral draws millions of tourists annually and is arguably the most visited monument in Europe. It's not yet known what caused the blaze, with authorities at the scene doing all they can to save what is left of the cathedral. We know that President Emmanuel Macron, he is at the scene and is holding emergency meetings with authorities there as devastated people from around the world are taking to Twitter and other social media platforms to express their heartbreak as the world watches on, with the fire still raging out of control, destroying one of the most famous symbols of civilization. Joining me on the phone is Faisal Ben Hussein, who's a journalist based in Paris. And Faisal was at the scene a little earlier tonight. Faisal, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Tell me, what sort of emotions were people expressing as you were pushed back there by police and you saw these flames quickly spread through the cathedral?
Well, the emotion, for instance, is very, very deep. I mean, everybody is shocked about what's happening. A lot of people were looking at the flames and the blaze that was destroying the part of the cathedral. Of course, the firefighters and police put everybody as far as possible because they have to work. But everybody was absolutely, completely speechless in a way. It was a very sad moment. Fortunately, if I may say so, apparently there is no victim. So at least there is something good in that's a very, very bad event.
OK, and Faisal, tell us, we're just hearing now that firefighters say the next 1.5 hours will be crucial to save what remains of the Notre Dame Cathedral. Tell us, just how bad is this destruction at this stage?
Well, they don't know yet, but they're trying, first of all, to extinguish the fire, which is the most difficult thing, because there are two things that people have to think about. First of all, yes, to extinguish the fire. But second, there are a lot of water that is pooling there. So the problem is the weight of the water can eventually destroy something of the roof where the fire is still on. So it's a very, very difficult situation. I think Of course, they are all professionals and they try to do the best. But apparently, just 2 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, let's say, a general of the firefighters was saying that, yes, the next 1.5 hours will be very, very determinant about what will happen. But they do everything they can in order to try first, once again, to extinguish the fire and not to cause more damage than it has been caused yet.
And Faisal, we know that Emmanuel Macron, this is the latest news coming out of this situation, he has just declared a national emergency, rather. He's in meetings right now with a number of heads of authorities. Tell us, what can we expect to come out of these meetings, and what are we hearing from Macron there?
Well, for the moment, I don't think we can say a lot of things because everybody is thinking about how to, once again, to finish with the fire. Then after that, we'll have to find out if it's really just an incident, a very bad accident, or if it has been something like a terrorist act, because that would be very important. Hopefully, a lot of people are saying that it's not a terrorist act, but let's see, because investigators are already opening an inquiry about that. What will happen? Well, for the moment, I think nothing, but don't forget that tomorrow will be another day, and we'll have to see exactly how the area will be contained, because it's central Paris, and there are a very huge hospital just in front of it. There is also the headquarters of the police just the other side of the street. So we'll see exactly what will happen, because they have to find a way of containing this place, but at the same time letting people go back to their home, because there are also houses there, people living there. So it's a very critical situation. Let's see what will happen.
And Faisal, just tell me how many more people will have gathered in Paris this week, especially given that Easter is coming up very shortly?
Yeah, that's a very big question, very good question, and very sad, because I don't have any answer. I don't think anybody has an answer, because every year at Easter there were a lot of people coming here, not only to see Paris, of course, but also to go to Notre Dame, because there are some masses that have been organized. So I don't know exactly how they're going to do. Eventually, they might organize some mass in front of the cathedral if nobody can get in. Well, at least that would be better than nothing. So really, we don't know exactly. I mean, the future, the next 4 or 5 days are difficult to forecast.
And Faisal, just finally, you were there, you saw all of this unfolding with your own eyes. You saw the flames licking at this 12th century cathedral. How did it make you feel?
Well, I don't like to make this kind of comparison, but it was exactly like, more or less exactly like the 9/11 in New York. I was in Washington at the time, living there, and also you remember the Pentagon had been bombed by terrorists. So it was something like that, very, very sad feeling. Why this is happening? Who is behind that? If there is somebody behind it, why now, and why this is happening? Of course, accidents happen all the time. Fires happen all the time. So, well, in a way, well, it happens, but why? Why? Everybody was thinking that. And a lot of people were just silent, looking at what was happening.
OK. Faisal Ben Hussein, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And a number of eyewitnesses have spoken out after they were watching this 12th century cathedral nearly burn to the ground. Let's take a little listen to some of those reactions.
At the beginning, we couldn't understand what was happening. We saw firemen and there was a lot of noise, and then we understood they couldn't control the fire, and then it just grew, and then the veil of smoke.
As an art historian, this is extremely moving for me. It's witnessing an entire culture fall apart in just a few hours, and it's just extremely emotional.
It's the Holy Week, and yesterday was Palm Sunday, so it's very painful for everyone. It's a church, and it's also part of the French culture. It's like a horror movie.
And let's now bring back in Owen Alterman and Jeff Abramowitz. Thank you both so much for staying in here. We just heard Faisal then touching on just how awful it is to watch something so symbolic be destroyed. He compared it to, let's say, 9/11 with the Twin Towers. What is your take on all of this?
Well, there's that thought going through people's minds. Of course, 9/11 was an act of terrorism. It was an act by human beings, and it was obvious from the moment it happened that that's what had happened. And here, that seems not to be the case, but of course, the Paris police are investigating to make sure that it was not the case. And as Christian Millard mentioned a few moments ago, it is a possibility that has to be looked into. But Sarah, regardless of whether this was done by men or whether this was an accident, that it's obviously a sad day. I mean, this is in some ways, Jeff, it seems almost like a place where France was born, where this cathedral went up.
I mean, a friend of mine in Paris, I think he put it best. He said the Eiffel Tower is the symbol of Paris to the tourists. The Notre Dame is the symbol of Paris to the people who live there.
It's like their heart.
Yeah, he said I mean, Paris, the distances in Paris, 0 to whatever, the 0 is outside Notre Dame in the square. It is the center.
Not just in Paris, but all of France, if I'm not mistaken.
It is the center.
And Jeff, while we're on that, tell us, what makes these cathedrals stand apart from others? What differs to other cathedrals in the world?
I think it's the symbolism and the grandeur. I mean, look, London has got St. Paul's, which is magnificent, beautiful. The other cathedrals in the world, but they don't have the history, they don't have the grandeur, the mystique of Notre Dame. Notre Dame has a mystique. It has a je ne sais quoi, as they say over there. I can't put my finger on it, but if you go to Notre Dame, you feel it. You feel it.
And we were mentioning just before things like the stained glass windows.
The glass windows are magnificent. The last example of medieval stained glass windows, I think. Now they're gone.
Certainly extremely heartbreaking. And Owen, tell us, many Israelis visit there. It's only a few hours away from where we are here in Israel, just a very short trip. What are we hearing? What sort of reaction are we hearing from Israel in regards to this?
Well, of course, you're right, Sarah. I visited with my wife just a few years ago, and I'm sure many Israeli tourists make their way there. Again, 13 million tourists going to Notre Dame, Sarah. By my calculation, that is 2.5 times the number of tourists who visit all of Israel in a given year. Listen, this has been a subject tonight that's gotten a lot of attention in Hebrew language media. The Israeli television stations reporting from the scene, including this in their 8 o'clock evening newscast here. We talked about the Israeli Foreign Ministry, which has reacted. I haven't seen any reactions from politicians yet, but I'm sure that that'll come in the next day. One interesting reaction on Twitter I want to put up on the screen by Arya Kovler, a political consultant. The viewers can see it, connecting this tragedy to the way he sees the tragedy of the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, using that as an inspiration. And you know, Sarah, there's an interesting story behind this as you read this tweet from Jewish literature, and a legend about Napoleon. Napoleon is a very positive figure in Jewish history. A lot of conquerors aren't, but Napoleon and Alexander the Great are two exceptions. And there's an anecdote of Napoleon walking through the streets of Paris on a Jewish holiday in the summer when the temple's destruction is mourned, and he hears the sounds of wailing and mourning from inside a synagogue, and he asks what's going on, and is told that the Jews in the synagogue are mourning the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago. And Napoleon says to the person next to him, if they're mourning the destruction of the temple from 2,000 years ago, they will live to see it rebuilt. And this is used in Jewish literature as a kind of inspiration and the importance of historical memory. And now it's almost as if you see that story being used in order to inspire the French. I almost felt that was behind the tweet. I thought it was fascinating and maybe a uniquely Jewish take on what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Jeff, your thoughts? No, and we must stress, Owen, we were speaking a little bit about this before, and while we need to say that there is still, authorities are still unsure as to what caused this blaze, there may be concerns that people may see this as an opportunity.
That's my question, Sarah. It's really a question for counterterrorism experts, and it's this. Regardless of what caused this fire, and we don't know what caused the fire, you have to wonder if the bad guys, if the terrorists sitting wherever they're sitting are looking at this and are getting inspiration from it, are getting ideas from it, and if you could see a kind of copycat attacks or attempts at copycat attacks. And as Christian Millard mentioned, it's not that this hasn't been thought of by these groups before. Symbolic targets are important targets for terrorism. Symbolism is the essence of what terrorism is. So I would want to ask those experts if this is something that we should be concerned about in days, weeks, months ahead.
Well, I'm surprised no terrorist group has actually claimed responsibility yet and said we did it. They're usually very quick whenever anything happens.
Even if it wasn't.
Whether they're connected to it or not. They're usually very quick to put out a tweet and say, yeah, we did it. And I'm surprised that I haven't seen anything yet.
And gentlemen, just very briefly, we are hearing that authorities are concerned that none of the cathedral will be able to be saved.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine Notre Dame completely destroyed?
I mean,
it's unthinkable.
Notre Dame stands where Paris was founded. That island where Notre Dame stands is where Paris was. It was where Paris was founded.
It will be literally
and now it's gone.
Hole in the middle of the city, in the middle of the country. I mean, in some ways, in the middle of Europe. It's just unthinkable.
Devastating. Well, we will continue to keep following this story. Owen Altman, Jeff Abramowitz, thank you so much. And we are continuing to see these live images coming in and now as this devastating blaze is ripping through the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Much of it has already been destroyed. French President Emmanuel Macron declaring a national emergency as people take to social media to express their absolute heartbreak watching this 12th century landmark go up in flames. And we will, of course, keep you updated on this developing story, so please do stay tuned. I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for watching.